All right, we are finishing this section one of This is Coaching. And I really liked this part of section one on this idea of being a container.
Yep.
So the container was kind of, to me, it had several, it was kind of a multi-purpose container because the container, I know at one point talked about the coaching agreement and the tough love, right? Holding people accountable, the accountability piece. But at other times, it talked about the container kind of being the like a training space, like a dojo, right? And so there was that like aspect of it. And then the container was also to me this vibe of love and caring about the client and keeping them safe and giving them that environment. So I will go kind of through each of those little pieces of it, but I've got to say I've not used like he talked about creating a space in the previous one, which I have used that terminology. I'm big on that. I don't think I've ever really used the terminology or the analogy of a container before. Do you have
Maybe
any introductory? Yeah.
we use a concept called win-win agreement. And what we'll do is we'll have the participants prior to the start, we'll have them list their top five most critical challenges. And then we'll tell them, have them convert them to goals. Then typically the goals relate to the five most critical challenges. And then when they come to the kickoff meeting, we'll do a, I guess you call it a sort of a brainstorming session to where we'll put each participant. So for easy math, 10 participants, we'll put the 3 to 5 goals that they've done on the board. And then we'll say, what are the common things we have? And we'll negotiate the top 3 to 5 goals for the group. Okay. So it starts with, so each individual thinks that they have, they provide, well, not they think, they have provided input for the whole group. But anyway, then that drives the goal. And so and if we get off on a track and go down a rabbit hole, we'll bring them back by saying, let's revisit the win-win agreement and talk about how that applies to what we want to accomplish here. So right off the bat, we've got them thinking about solving problems and doing things better. And so I related that to the container
Mhm.
because that gives us a track to run on, sort of puts the sides and the doesn't really put a roof on it, but it puts the floor and the sides. And when
Mhm.
the roof can, we can go as high up as we can build second and third stories. Does that communicate with you?
Yeah, I like it. And it made me think of something. There's a professional speaker that trains professional speakers named Sardique Love. I don't know if you're familiar with Sardique Love or Sardi Love. I go to these training magazine conferences and ATD conferences, right? And he speaks at those. And he does this activity where he has everybody at the banquet tables come up with a problem, and everyone on a card writes what they feel is a top challenge. Then the table they read their challenge to the table, and the table chooses which one of those challenges they feel is the most sort of universal pressing, that they all can agree on.
Uh-huh.
Then how does it work? It's and then I guess then they start mingling and forming these other small groups, and they have to they take two. I guess no, I guess everybody has a challenge. That's what it is. And you take your challenge against somebody else's. You go around mix and mingle, and you say which is more important. You can give it a 0 to 5 on the card, and they keep writing these numbers on the cards, and somehow the cards keep changing hands anyway. In the end, we all sit down and they say, okay, does anybody have a card that's got on the back 45 points or more, 42 points or more, right? And then they go in and finally like the top five of like there's 200 people in the room, right? And
Uh-huh.
it's like we've just vetted, this many challenge. So similar concept, but it's more of a group activity. Um, but I hadn't thought of that as being like a vessel, but it does create that because then there's all this ownership of the premise of yeah, I like it.
Yeah. If you'd like, I can show you that win-win agreement
Oh
real quick.
yeah, let me have you do that before I share the
Can
Kindle.
you can
Yeah.
you make me co-facilitator?
Yeah, I think you're allowed to share no matter
Oh,
what,
okay.
but
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, see, and this is fillable. So they put their name, company, and the date. Then they list their five challenges. Then they list how important they are. We tell them don't give a lot of thought to the challenge. Just list your top five. Then come over here and put down how important they are, and then
And is that numerical, the importance piece?
say that again.
Is that a numerical evaluation?
Yeah, we'll just tell them we'll rate. Yeah, in other words, number one might be fifth in importance.
Yeah.
Number two might be first in importance.
So a rank. Okay.
So because what happens if people stop and think what we
Oh, it
found
says rank. Okay.
before we added this column, people would take too much time trying to figure out what number one was. We say just list the top five, and
Yeah.
then come over here and tell them which is which. Then, based on the importance, you take the number one from over here and put it down here as a tentative goal. So let's say the number one challenge they have is enough time to do one-on-one coaching, and they put down here uh, uh, carve out uh, conduct one coaching session per week per employee per direct report, and they'll list those goals down there. And then they don't fill out this bottom part when they come to the kickoff meeting. We'll put on the board. We'll have people stand up and tell what they are, or come up and write on the board what their top 3 to 5 goals are, because not everybody comes up with five. And then what we'll do then is negotiate. Say, okay, we'll group together the commonalities. You know, uh, we get communication a lot. Number one problem is communication. And so we'll group those together. And then what we'll do is have them list which ones, overall for the group. The number one group on the goal is we want to do more one-on-one coaching. And so everything we do uh, everything we do from that point on, whether it's um, anyway, so we tie it into
That's
how it
cool.
pertains to the five most important goals for the group. And so that, and again, that we call it a win-win agreement, but it's not necessarily, and then some people will do rules uh, to where they'll list the rules, don't interrupt, and you've seen different people do that different
Yeah.
ways. So I think
Yeah.
between those two things, it creates a container.
I just wouldn't have thought of it like that, but especially since you showed it to me, then it does create this container of these are our agreements, but like in the book, he says, be soft with them if they change their minds, if they realize they see someone else's and they're like, wait, that one's even more important. That's fine, right? But we're creating as we go, and it's this pottery wheel on which we can throw the things. Yeah, I like it. Very true. Very
Yeah,
good. Thank you.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you to everybody who sees the replay for being able to see that as well. I love it.
Sure.
So, to me, the container conversation gets super interesting as we go a little deeper into it. So, he talks about just containers in general. That's fine. He talks about how we just really often are so busy thinking about, what we say and what we ask and how we show up and what insights people get that we're not really paying attention to the importance of the container. And I do, like he said, we don't make the container strong enough because in the case of my coach certification, I'm always really asking people, you've got to consider your opinion about tough love or whatever you want to call that, right? And holding people accountable and to what degree you'll hold people accountable. Make that be a part of the conversation you have with the client. So I agree 100% with that. And then he says that one of the reasons that we don't make our container strong enough is our own fears. And that's a conversation that I think every coach needs to have first with themselves and then with the client about what are your expectations? How much do you expect me to hold your feet to the fire? And I've got to be honest with my coach certification participants, when I ask them about how tough are you going to be with the accountability, most of them say not that tough. And I'm like, you kind of feel that out and you talk to the client. I said, but I know as a client, I insist that my coach be a really tough coach. And if I don't have a tough coach, it's not going to work for me. And I have that conversation with my clients. And so I tend to agree with the author that we don't make our containers strong enough. That's one of the reasons that people are a bit disillusioned sometimes with coaches and coaching. Do you have
Mhm.
any thoughts on the like that strong accountability piece?
I do, and I have a personal story that I use in my one-on-one coaching. The is when I was state president of a volunteer organization. We had 15,000 members, 300 chapters. It was a big deal, and it was a tremendous growth experience for me. The But at the beginning of the year, we had 67 district vice presidents, and I had every one of them put on a paper flip chart how many members they had currently and how many they were going to recruit during the year because we were all about growth, recruiting new members. And uh, 3 months into my year, we hadn't had any growth. Matter of fact, we'd declined in membership some. And so I brought in a speaker from another state organization, and he asked me what I wanted to do. I said, I said, here's what I did. I had these three big flip charts with 20 some names on each one, and with two numbers, current and goal. Oh, and then I think actual. And we'd change it every month at our monthly meeting. And I said, we flattened out and actually declined the membership. He said, tell you what, Rex, he said, I'll have them standing on their chairs within 5 minutes of you introduce me. I'll have them standing on their chairs yelling at the top of their lungs. I said, no, that'll never happen. We are sophisticated in this organization. We're not a bunch. The guy was from Arkansas. I said, we're not from Arkansas. We're from Ohio. And anyway, long story short, he gets up there and he said, do you remember putting on this flip chart what your goal was for new membership at the beginning of the year? If you did, raise your hand. If you meant it when you said it, stand up. If you meant it when you said it, stand on your chair. If you meant it, and I'm giving you a shortcut answer here. If you meant it when you said it, I want you to say out loud 3 times, each time louder than before. I meant it when I said it. And I had 70 some people because we had national directors and other staff members. We had 70 some people standing on chairs, yelling at the top of their lungs. I meant it when I said it. So I tell a coaching class, I said that we went on to become the largest state in the nation. We exceeded our membership goal, and we had a great year, tremendous experience. But I said I look back at that speech where he got us to make a verbal commitment that we meant it when we said it. So if I'm coaching you, Sherry, I would say, now, Sherry, I'm not going to make you stand on a chair and yell at the top of your lungs. I meant it when I said it. But when you tell me you're going to do something, I expect you to do it. And when we come back for our next session and you haven't done it, I'm going to say to you, Sherry, what will I
Did
say
you
to you?
mean it when you
Did
said
you mean it when you
it?
said it? And so people get it. They get it. So sure enough, people come back and they haven't done their assignment. I said, Sherry, okay, Rex. I said, no, look, it doesn't matter what you tell me, but if you tell me you're going to do something, it can be small, it can be medium, it can be large. I expect you to do it. So, and then the other thing I talk about, just a real quick another story. I talk about my daughter when she was 16 and started to drive. 11 o'clock was a curfew. And our deal was that you need to be home inside the house, not driving down the street, not in the driveway, not in the garage, in the house by 11. And she agreed to that. And I said, if for any reason you can't be home by 11, I want you, as soon as you know you can't be home by 11, I want you to call and tell me. And if you need my help, I'll be there. No questions asked. I said, but I said, I want you to call me and tell me when you will be home. And so one time, Lindsay called me and she was at Amber's house and I knew it was about 20 minutes away. She called me at 10 till 11. I I knew she wasn't going to make it home. She said, Dad, she said, I'm sorry, I lost track of time. And I said, I'm not just now leaving Amber's house. It'll probably be about 11:10 time. I said, Lindsay, that is okay. Uh, Drive safe. I'll see you when we get home. No issue. Zero, because she lived up to our agreement. Now, what would have happened if I talk? What would most people do if their child doesn't live up to commitment, live up to custody? They'd talk, I'm sorry, curfew. They would talk to them about curfew. I said, no, I would never talk to my child about curfew. I would talk to my child about commitment. And I said, so Sherry, if you don't do your assignment, we're not going to talk to you about the assignment. We're going to talk to you about living up to your commitment. And I'm going to live up to all of my commitments I make to you. And if I don't live up to them, you got every right to call me on my commitment. So anyway, those are two. But I find if I tell a story, then all I got to do is tell them part of the story, and it clicks. And now they know I'm serious. And I've had people quit my coaching, which is fine because I don't want to waste my time on someone that isn't going to live up to their commitments. So
No, I
anyway,
love it. And then you have that little phrase that you can say. So I have this when I train coaches, if people start getting defensive in the coaching, it's because I'm gonna say as the coach, watch out. It probably is more about you. You've made it a little bit more about you giving them advice, and now they're being defensive. Um, so if you do, find that they're getting defensive, first check on that. And then if that's not what it is, it usually is because they're trying to kind of get out of their commitments or whatever. And I have a thing that I say to my clients. I say, you're fine the way you are.
Exactly.
You don't need to change. You don't need to do anything different at all.
Yep.
The reason we're here is because you said that you
Yep.
wanted to work on this, this, and this. You
Yep.
can change your mind at any point. So, is this something you still want to work on? Do you want to work on something different? Do you not want to work on anything at all? And then they reaffirm their commitment very similarly, just a different approach, right? And then I say, okay, well, so now let's take a look at the steps we agreed would be the good steps to take. Do these still look good? Or is there something we need to do to make this action plan more what you're looking for? No, this one looks good, or we modify it, right? So
Yep.
then once we reestablish the commitment, then it becomes, okay, then what needs to happen for you
Yep.
to follow through on this? So it's what's cool is once you do that though, then all I have to do, I don't have to go through the whole thing anymore. All I have to say is you're fine the way you are. And they're like, okay, they know what the rest of the story is, right?
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah. Are you familiar with, have you read anything by Michael Bungay Steiner? The
Yes.
Coaching Habit and the Advice Trap?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Advice trap, big time.
He talks about, asking instead of telling. Um, and then the other thing that came to mind as you were talking is Dan Sullivan in a strategic coach says if we were to meet 3 years from today and we're looking back on the past 3 years, what would have had to have happened for you to be excited about the results you got? You can change that any way you want. But again, that gets them looking out into the future and visualizing what they want to accomplish as a result of our coaching together, working together. Um, so anyway, as I was reading this, I had I flashed to a lot of different things that I've been exposed to over the years.
Yeah, because he had something like that, the future pacing piece. He does talk about that a little bit. So my one more story, since we're doing it this way, I mean, nobody else being here and go as far in the book or not as we want. But I am a terrible client and I don't follow through on any of the commitments I make to my coach. And it's systemic. And I had a really a coach that I paid a lot of money to, Kellen Flukiger. And I didn't follow through. And the reason he charged so much is he said, when you pay more, you end up doing more. And it didn't make a difference to me. And then I had another coach that I paid really very little to. I just picked her up and she was fun and it was fun. I picked her up and I paid her like, $75 a session or something like very reasonable, right? Um, and she would give me these little assignments. And part of it was because she would give the assignments to me. They weren't mine, it was like, okay, well, you want me to do that. I don't really care. But I would make commitments too, and I wouldn't follow through. And finally, I think I worked with her for 2.5 months. And she said, I don't think this is working out. And she fired me. And it was really funny because I thought that was so funny. Like this coach that was this low price coach that I kind of just enjoyed meeting because it was good to have a low price coach that I could, because I already had these expensive coaches. I didn't want another expensive coach. And I was like thinking to myself, why would she fire me? Like it's no skin off her nose. Like, if I don't do my deal, then what does she care? I really didn't, you know,
Yep.
terrible client. I'm a terrible client.
Physician, heal thyself, right?
Right? Well, and that was
Physician,
one of the,
heal thyself.
right? And
Yeah.
one of the things he said last week is that you become a better coach. You need to be a better client to be a better coach.
Right. Yep.
So that part, and then he adds at the end of this little section, here's the secret. The container is the coaching.
Right.
How they and you show up in the face of their commitments is relevant to every part of their life, to do everything they want to create, to every future dream and vision. It is what you're there for. And if you set powerful agreements on the strength of your container at the start, it's another tool in the service of their transformation when challenges arise. So
Yep.
nice. So then he kind of goes into how to make more powerful containers, define the game you're playing, imagine success. This is what you were just talking about. Imagine success in the future, and then from the future, look back and ask what happened along the way to get you there. Make agreements and review them together, review them frequently. And then the last thing he says to break stuff, like, allow, like what you do with your daughter, it's like, no, when I made this commitment to you, it wasn't about your coming home at 11. It was about your keeping your commitment. And when you kept your commitment and you made the phone call, we broke, like, it was, this is, I think that's what he means by kind of breaking it. It's like, okay, so now I came home after 11 and the world didn't come to an end, but I kept my commitment and it worked, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of what we've been talking about, and that's kind of how he puts it together. Uh, and then um, and then he goes into the exploration questions. So anything else under the container before we finish up section one?
Well, not all cases, but in this case and near the end of the next section, the shaded areas has some really rich stuff in it. The exploration questions and what do you want, or what do they want? I'm sorry, what do they need? What's their breakthrough? What's my breakthrough? Um, I guess because I've been doing this 52 years, that didn't resonate as much, but I see it maybe in new coaches. It would have more things. And then the needs, I put a big box around those and underlined several things on page 50. I realize you're using Kindle, but
Yeah, I have the
anyway,
physical
so
one
I,
too.
I
I mean,
underlined
just
a lot of
shaded in
stuff
the
on those
physical. Yeah.
the gray shaded pages.
Yeah, that's where we're headed now. So yes,
Oh,
I
oh,
love
okay,
them. Yeah, you're good. So what he says here is that basically you want to start by exploring wants, needs, breakthroughs.
right.
So then he goes one by one into each of those, and then starting with what do they want, and the idea of it is when your job is not to filter their answers when taking notes, but to capture as accurately as possible what they say. So this is where, when I in my coach certification, we have this thing where in the very first session, when you're writing down all the things they say they want, we actually say write down exactly verbatim in the words that they use. Because if they say, I remember I had a client say, I need to work on my physicality. That was weird, but that's the way he said it. So
Uh-huh.
who am I as the coach to write down, I want to get more physically fit? That's not what he said. And so if I come back and talk about, okay, on your goal here of getting more physically fit, he's going to be like, did I have a goal of getting more physically fit? There's a disconnect there. So writing down their exact words, because those words mean something to them. It's not about hearing what they say, filtering it through your impression of what of what they're saying. It really is about sort of capturing what they say and feeding it back to them, that's a piece of it. It was only just one sentence or whatever, but I find that to be an important piece of what I train coaches to do. And then these questions, like you're saying, what are they avoiding? What is missing from what they say they want? That's an interesting one. What do they assume is impossible or assume is guaranteed to happen when they start moving toward what they want? What breakdown are they trying to avoid in their strategies? Now, that last one's a really big one for me that I'll say a couple of words about, but anything there before we move forward
Well,
specifically?
um, I don't remember if he says it somewhere in this book, or I assumed it, is as a coach, we need to be careful about the stories we tell. That we don't, Cy Wakeman talks about when you're judging, you're not helping. And we got to be careful, that we don't judge them and we don't assume what they're, do you think he means that we need to ask these people what they're avoiding? Or do we need to assume that we know what they're avoiding? Because I think
So
one is dangerous and one is helpful.
So I agree. There are times there's a moment later on when he says if you do any assuming like that you should hold it very lightly. So he says as a coach, it is important to read between the lines and speculate. Like
Okay.
what might be missing here?
Uh-huh.
What is it that as I look at the things that they want, what kind of looks like it's not been expressed but might somehow be lurking somewhere, right? Read between the lines, use your intuition, but hold on to it lightly because it
Hmm.
wasn't, something the client said. Be very aware that it wasn't something the client said. Highlight it in a different color. Do something to make sure that you're aware that that was just your speculation. And I'll do that. I'll write my speculations in the margins with question marks, right? And then I'll be like, okay. And then I'll just have that over here. And then as I'm talking to them, I'm kind of testing, like, does this appear to be something that we might want to explore later? And then sometimes I listen and I'm like, no, that really doesn't appear to be there. And I'll cross it out, that's
Uh,
what I think he means by carrying it lightly. So I do think that we need to be non-judgmental and take things at face value, but I also think they hire us as coaches because we do have some experience and knowledge and intuition that might be valuable.
yeah. Yep. I believe in trusting my intuition and at the same time verifying it by saying something like, Sherry, I sense that you're avoiding confrontation in dealing with Susan. Uh, am I sensing that right? Or tell me about it. And one of my favorite coaching phrases is tell me about it. That you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say, tell me about it. You make a statement, I say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me about it. Well, but no,
Very good.
yeah, I like any questions that stimulates my thinking, which helps me then ask the right questions in a coaching environment.
Yeah, so I do because I do think it's like some coaches are really big on speculating and saying, "Oh, I see what's going on here." We cannot do that. But I don't think we should not do that. I like the way he says, just hold on to it lightly. Just hold on to it lightly. Have it
Yeah.
over there on the side. Ask some questions to verify. Differentiate between what the client actually said and what you were trying to read between the lines on.
Hmm.
Yeah. What do they need? Now, here's the one that you said you circled. It basically, this is an excellent idea. It says list all the things you believe would serve your client, even if they can't see them. This is your chance to hone your coach intuition and identify opportunities to tell your clients things everyone else in their life is afraid to tell them. If you were going to design an epic fairy tale that gave them everything they wanted, then what would you give them? What is their soul crying out for that someone will hear? Again, this is a list for you to look at, but I'm with you, Rex. I mean, be very careful not to presume that you know what's best for your client, right?
Hmm. Yep.
There we go. This is where he says that thing I said. Most importantly, never forget that this list is something to hold very lightly. Always remember you aren't right. This is simply what you see from your perspective. If you cling to these things as truth, you'll soon find yourself attached to your clients following the path you've chosen for them. That isn't your job.
Yeah, I missed that. I read it, but I didn't underline it. I, I just must have skimmed that paragraph. Something to hold lightly. I like that.
Yeah. I like that where it's like not restricting us from it, but just making sure that we're careful. Yeah.
Hmm.
So what is their breakthrough? What is your breakthrough, right? So he kind of defines that a breakthrough happens when they break through their fears, right? When they are here and there's something that's keeping them from being where they want to go and they break through it. Mostly fear. So, that's where it's interesting. I feel like he puts less, um, insight into their breakthrough than he does our breakthrough, which I know you said that wasn't as important to you, but might be more important to a new coach. So I'll speak to the your breakthrough part. Do you have anything that you want to put into the their breakthrough part?
No, I actually I didn't underline anything on that page because
Mhm.
I agree with it conceptually that what I'm looking for is that um, is a breakthrough that they got to change what they're to change their behavior they have to change their thought patterns and have to change their self-talk. So one of the things that I look for is, and I use the model, I think I mentioned it last time, about we see or hear something, we tell a story, then then based on the story we tell our emotions kick in and we act accordingly. So I'm big on listening to people's story, and in my mind if I can get them to recognize that a story isn't serving them well, that what they're telling themselves isn't working, that's a breakthrough. So I related to that conceptually, but from a technique, I'm happy with using the story. And I'll get people say to me 2, 3 years later, I guess I need to change my story on that, don't I? I don't even have to say anything.
So I feel like that there are two types of breakthroughs that I see a lot in a coaching conversation. One is like what you described. They have a breakthrough. They saw it this way before, and now they see it this way. Oh, I handle things in the way that makes sense for the way I see them. If I see this as a threat, it makes sense to run away from it. If I see this as an opportunity, it makes sense to take advantage of it. So that's one kind of breakthrough, is that mental make changing your story. I also find that, to go back to what we said about the container, sometimes a breakthrough isn't an aha. Sometimes a coaching session didn't have any great, like, oh my gosh, I had a big
Right.
breakthrough. It just comes down to, oh my gosh, you're right. I need to this week sit down and do these. And it sometimes really becomes like doing that commitment and really seeing the commitment differently, and really doubling down on a commitment. And it wasn't a big insight. It was just that. So I feel like the two main breakthroughs that I see are the things that we've just talked about:
Mm.
the insight type breakthrough and the container commitment type breakthrough.
Yeah. And then something that reinforces that, and he may cover it later on, is at the end of every coaching session, I ask people sort of a two-part question, but it's an addendum that I'll say, Sherry, what are you going to do different as a result of our discussion today? What are you going to do? I'll sort of pause and say, what are you going to do more of, less of, or better? And every phone call I work in at some point, usually at the end, what are you going to do more of that will help you be more successful? What are you going to do less of that's getting in the way of your success? And what are you already good at that you can get even better at? And so that a lot of times creates a breakthrough right there, because a lot of if they had other coaches or never been coached, no one's ever asked them, what are you going to do? What are you going to do different as a result of our conversation?
True. And that's a great way to put it. I like it very much.
Mhm.
So, what's my breakthrough? So, this is predicated on the first sentence. Imagine that the universe brought you and your client together for a reason. What might that reason be? What lesson might be here for you to learn? Um, and notice he says, don't worry, if you're like me, you might resist this part. That you might think about that. How can I be thinking about myself, right? But um, you know, what he basically offers, though, are these questions that it is important to ask yourself so that you can discover your breakthrough. And what is nice about this is that it's not this selfish thing that says, I didn't get why I didn't get my breakthrough today, right? It's not that. When you look at these questions, it's like, oh, this is what's good for the client too. It's where I'm asking myself, wait a minute, what am I finding myself wanting to change about them? Where might it be that I'm pushing my own agenda on them? What is different about how I engage with them versus how I might be engaging with others? What feelings come up when I think about this particular client? What are my growth edges right now? And what is it that this person is bringing into my life that is right there, where in that sweet spot of something I'm working on right now? And then when you read that, then it's not about making it about you, but it is about it's about, but in the process of being intentional about not making it about you, you are making it about you, because in that process, you're uncovering your own breakthroughs.
Mhm. Yep. Probably the biggest breakthrough I've had over the years, and it's happened early on, was patience. I tend to be a do it now, let's get after it type of person. And a lot of folks I've coached over the years are. I read something one time. I don't remember where I saw it, but something about, oh shoot, waiting, sitting at the table with your mouth open, waiting for the Peking duck to fly in. That's, people think success is going to come to them without any work. Yeah.
And you're right, the patience piece. I do this with when I train coaches all the time. Where we do sample coaching, and then they'll be like, well, we went over here, but then we didn't get that done. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Here's the question. Is the client in a different place than they were when they started? Yes. That's always at the end of the coaching. Are they in a different place than they were when they started? Do they see more possibilities now than they saw before? Neurolinguistic programming says that the goal of any operation is to increase choice. They see more choices now than they saw. They see
Yeah,
different choices now than they saw before. And so I'll do this all the time. I'll talk, and a client will say something, and there are 18 amazing things in what they just said. 18, like, and I'll write down I'll write down 17 of them and only follow through on one this coaching session. That to
right.
me was the patience, right? It's like, okay, right now we're working on this. Let's work through this thread all the way through. Let's clear it through. Let's take it to its end. And then, of course, I'm not saying you can only work on one thing at a time, but Rome wasn't built in a day, right?
Yeah,
You're always going to have things kind of on the sideline, on the back burner that you're still looking at.
yeah. Another thing I emphasize is small changes made consistently will generate huge improvements. And so I concentrate. You don't. People say, "Well, yeah, I really didn't see any growth, or I really didn't do anything better." I said, well, let's look for one little thing that you did. It doesn't have to be world shaking.
Well, I remember when I'm re-upping, when you re-up when you decide, do I want to keep on with this coaching, right? The time
Mm.
kind of comes and it's time to look and re-up with the coaching. And I remember when I was working with Kellen the first time and I was trying to decide, I was like, well, wait a minute. I had a couple of very specific things that I had said for a long time that I wanted to do, and I ended up doing them. And even though it never feels like the coach is the one that helped you do it. Like one of the agreements at the beginning, one of the things I tell them is I want to let you know right now that when you make really big changes, then if I'm doing my job right, it won't feel like I helped at all in making the changes. That's because what my job is as a coach is for it to be your idea and have it be something that's all generated by you. So what I'd
Uh-huh.
like to have you use as the measure of whether the coaching has been valuable or not is what is it that you've been trying to achieve? How successful and how quick have you been at achieving it without a coach? How successful are you and how quick are you able to do it with a coach? That's going to really be your only way to be able to tell whether the coaching was successful.
Good. Yep, I like that.
So I just opened up this thing because you talked about those small incremental changes. And when I worked with that coach, Kellen, he had this thing that he did with us that he called the daily accountability ritual. And he had, it was a group coaching, this particular one. And he had us pick one thing we would do every single day in each area of life: body, bank, being, and balance.
Hmm.
So we all picked something, and then we were supposed to keep score and give ourselves 1 point for each time we did it each day. So the goal was to get 28 points every week, right? 7 times 4.
Uh-huh.
So the first week, nobody got 28, nobody even got 14. So here's the part that's cool. So at that moment, when none of us had even gotten half of them, guess what he said?
Uh, what are you going to do to improve?
So you would think that, right? Everyone thinks that. Instead, he said, make it smaller.
Oh,
Make
okay.
each of the thing right. So that, I mean, but it was brilliant, right? So
Yeah,
he's like, go back through each of the four things, make them smaller. The key is to pick four things that you will do every single day without fail. So we
yeah,
made them smaller. The next week, everybody hit 14, but still nobody hit 28. And again, he said, make it smaller, right? So by
yeah.
the third and fourth week, we all were getting 28. But by that point, the thing we were doing was not a very big thing. It wasn't some earth shattering, oh my goodness, I'm so proud of myself. I did these four things. But I have to tell you, this exercise transformed my life. It had a ripple effect in every area of my life, which goes back to what this author said before when he talked about the container and how that commitment, following through on a commitment you make to yourself, permeates every area of your life. Even though the four things I did were tiny, it didn't matter. I was keeping my promises to myself. I said I would do something and I followed through, and I realized how much I break the promises I make to myself all the time.
Yep, that's good.
So he gives an example that kind of goes through the whole model, which I think is super helpful. when you're able to kind of go through it. He takes all the different pieces, wants, needs, their breakthrough, my breakthrough. And then the final note in the first chapter is recognizing that sometimes you said it, Rex, someone's not a good fit. Someone stops coaching with you. Someone doesn't keep up with it. And he just recognizes that since we're talking about how their breakthroughs facilitate our breakthroughs, their
Hmm.
lack of breakthroughs facilitate our breakthroughs,
Right.
their acceptance of us and their rejection of us can all be ways for us to get our own breakthroughs. And he says to use it as a filter,
Hmm.
that the idea that the client decides whether you're a good fit or not, and you decide whether they're a good fit or not.
Yep.
So that's where we're going to go ahead and stop at the end of chapter one. Go ahead. Anything else that you were going to say, Rex? I appreciate you.
No, I underline that. I underline that too. The good fit part. Who's a good fit and who isn't.
Yeah.
Uh, um, on the previous page, again, it may be different on your Kindle, but uh, that I am a transformative presence. That and I see, and that's why I think I related so much to Michael Bungay's asking that you really don't transform people by telling them what to do because then it's your goal, not theirs. And I learned that early in my career. I was when I went into the home office of LMI and I was a sales coach. These folks had put up some of them had put up their life savings to buy a franchise, and and I would tell them, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then when they wouldn't do it, I'd say, how come you didn't do that? And they say, well, that was your goal, not mine. Well, I thought, okay. So that was a breakthrough for me that I'm not going to tell them anymore. I'm going to say, what's your goal? And that was I was only 33 years old and had a lot to learn. So, but yeah, as I look back, that was a huge breakthrough. But yeah, and I had more than one person say, well, that was your goal, not mine, in a real huffy manner. Like, oh, well, you expect me to work on your goals? No. Yeah.
Good,
So,
good point. Perfect. Well,
uh,
thank you. This has been wonderful. I feel like, look, we got this great facilitation with this very wise, very experienced
what,
leader, and I appreciate you so much.
what,
I
what are
do
the
still have.
plans? You're going to do, you're going to do one more, you're going to cover the rest of the book in the next Monday?
Yeah, well, no, it was just that next Monday's the last time I have for a while.
Oh,
But
okay.
we'll come back and no, yeah, I really did want to, you can always read a book on your own, but to stop and
Okay.
discuss like we
Sure.
did and share
Okay.
the
Yeah, no,
examples
no,
is
so good.
beautiful.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
finished the second section, and I'll finish the book before, probably even before next Monday. But and just thinking ahead, same thing on the shaded part near the end of near the end of the chapter. I found extremely helpful in the next section, but we don't have time to go there tonight. So
No, I was gonna do part two tonight, but when it was you, I
no,
thought, oh, this will be a fun thing for us to really just
sure,
leisurely have a conversation. But
yeah,
yes, part two next week. We'll see how much of that we wanna cover, but it goes more deeply into the what they want. So
right,
thank you
exactly.
again. I
You're welcome.
appreciate you.
Thank you, Sherry. Bye bye.
Uh-huh.
Appreciate you. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.